Welcome to the Corporate Detox Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda McWhorter. I'm a corporate dropout, recovering people pleaser and perfectionist turned burnout recovery coach. If you are sick of the corporate roller coaster ride and ready to step into a life you love, this is the podcast for you. Hey there, welcome back to the Corporate Detox Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda McWhorter, and in today's episode, I am so excited to be joined by a friend and a client of mine, Joelle Moray. Joelle is deeply passionate about learning and unlearning and learning again. She viscerally believes that there is a better way to live than what we're taught in traditional medicine and talk therapy. And she is on this planet to bring people together, to get curious about the body and mind, and to explore a better way to live. She is a writer and a speaker with 15 years experience. And currently, she's working on her first book. Joelle is certified in integrative somatic trauma therapy, trauma-informed mindfulness, trauma-informed yoga, and psychological first aid. Joelle is currently finishing her master's degree in clinical rehabilitation and clinical mental health counseling. She is on a mission to normalize emotional, behavioral, and physical health. Thriving is our birthright, and she's one of the people here to help you take charge of your health and change your life. Okay, Joelle, thank you so much for being here. I'll tell you, it has been a long time that it's been on my heart for you to be on the podcast. I think we talked about it in the fall maybe, and it just wasn't, timing just wasn't right. But so I'm going to let you get into your corporate detox story, because it always like lights a fire in my belly to listen to you talk about, your journey and where you're at and where you're going. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and why don't you just get us started with that?
Okay, sure. Yeah. So my career was a little more than 15 years. It was in total, it was about like 18 years, but 15 years in the same sort of space. And that had to do with government affairs, public affairs. So not to be confused with public relations. So not only was I in corporate, but I was also very visible and very high profile in terms of just out in the world. That was sort of the nature of the role. So you sort of get a little bit from both ends, because you're dealing directly with the public in a very public way, as well as the corporate. I'm sure you can relate to that coming from the retail space, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, there's a lot happening on the corporate side that you're trying to keep that going. And then very unhappy sometimes people who are dealing with or engaging with, the brand that you're representing. So as you sort of get knocked around from both sides, right? And, and I chose that path, and it wasn't all bad, right? I got a lot from that. I got a lot of growth, certainly grew a ton as an individual, as a professional. Some of my closest and best friendships that I have now are because of my career, right? And every single way that I've grown professionally is from that. So, and of course, financially, it's been very, served me well as well. So lot of positives and a lot of good things. And I'd be remiss if I didn't kind of mention that, right? And the work I'm in now uses and instead of but. So, and I think that word "and" is very important, because some people, especially as we are detoxing from corporate, try to use the word but it pays really well, but I'm good at it, but it pays the bills, it helps us go on great vacations, you know what I mean? So I don't want to sound like I'm ungrateful. Both can exist simultaneously. It can be true that there are certain things that you are benefiting from this position, including you chose it, right? You actively chose this career. And it's also killing you physically, spiritually, mentally, right? So both can exist, for sure. So I started to become a little disenfranchised several years ago. I started noticing a pattern with leadership team, as well as myself, where the job becomes you, right? You're working, this is not a 9 to 5 life. It is all the time. It is evenings, it is weekends, it is holidays. I've worked on Christmas Day. I've worked, New Year's Eve, right? Like Mother's Day, etc. Right. I mean, there's, 4th of July, name your holiday. I have worked it for sure, probably multiple times. 60, 70, 80 hours a week was not uncommon. And I started noticing just sort of, I didn't have the word burnout in my lexicon at the time, but just noticing like, man, I'm tired. Like, why am I so tired all the time? Or just starting to notice that I didn't have capacity for things like fun. you know, um, I would go literally years without taking a vacation. And that's not to say I didn't take a day off or time off. I literally never planned and went anywhere. I noticed that I wasn't spending quality time with friends. I have a cousin with whom I'm very close who lives a 3-hour drive from me. Like, when's the last time I went and saw her? The things that really matter. And I started noticing my physical health started to show some signs of significant stress. And then I started noticing it in leadership team. And not only was I noticing it in leadership team, but they're being praised for it. Right. And some pretty substantial health things that were happening. High blood pressure, heart attack in one case, people going on vacation and calling into the weekly Teams call. And not only that, but like being praised for it, right? Like, look at you called in on your vacation. Hurrah. And I thought, well, if the boss is working on vacation and being praised for it, that's clearly the expectation for me also. And, it's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? There's not one giant thing that happens. I mean, maybe for some people it is. For me, there wasn't one moment of like, that's it. Like, I'm out of here. It was these little things over time. And, I just over time slowly said, okay, this isn't for me. And I'm fulfilled, even though I'm happy. I'm happy and not fulfilled. Very good at my job, really rose up through the ranks, and had all the trappings of success. And there's a lot after that word and. So in my case, I started noticing just physical ailments, right? Insomnia, anxiety, a lot of anxiety, work related and not work related, and infertility in my case. So it's like, at what point, that 5-figure bonus becomes really insignificant really fast, when the other things are happening, right? Because what good is any financial benefit if you're not around?
Right.
What good is any financial benefit if you go on the vacation, but you're still plugged in, you're still dialed in, right? You're still not present with your family. You're still not present with yourself when you're doing that. So, that just kind of led to me going, there's got to be more to life than this. There's got to be more to life than this. And so that started me on my road to recovery.
So you stepped into a season of life, and I might be jumping ahead, so stop me if
no,
I am.
please, no.
You brought up your struggles with infertility. And then you were blessed with not one foster baby infant, but
Mhm.
two in a very short period of time. So it was like life just totally turned upside down. I would guess in those moments for you too.
Yes. Yes. And so in a very, very remarkable and unbelievable twist of fate, March 12th, 2020 happened. And they said, take your laptop home today and see if you can log into the VPN. You know, this virus is happening and we might work from home sometimes. And I never went back, like ever. And when that happened, the first day, so what would have been Friday the 13th of March 2020, everyone's logging in. Can we get on the VPN? Is it working? Can we still access, you know, Microsoft Teams, whatever? I think actually then it was in the initial days, it was like Skype or something. But anyway, um, you know, can we access our email? Can we access the server? Can we do the work from home? And we found out very quickly that yeah, we can. And you know, and everyone has their own, you know, purview on that. My perspective was, oh my God, this is the greatest thing that has ever happened in my career. Like, oh my God, we get to work from home. This is amazing. And I still stand by that. And so that really, you know, there's been actually a few studies conducted on, you know, people went home to work and really started evaluating, what do I value? And most people don't get into values work. Most people don't ask themselves what they value. And if their behavior and their choices in life are aligning with those values, most people don't do that. But like globally, people did that
Yeah.
in this 2020 for the first time ever. And then we started seeing this thing like quiet quitting and the great resignation and all these things that now have a name, you know, started happening because people went home and for the first time were forced to sort of stop
Yeah.
or at least pause and go, wait a minute. maybe I really don't love wearing those stilettos every day. Maybe I kind of love wearing this. This feels really good, you know. And so I was one of those people for sure who went, yeah, this is the hard stop I needed to go, what do I actually value? You know what? This house is actually kind of large. Do we need a house this big? You know? And truly I sold my house and bought a less expensive house in that time. Because why? You know, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Literally, what are we doing?
Uh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so, long way to answer your question. So that was March 2020. And then in August 2020, our son was born. And we got a phone call that said there's a baby boy. He was just born. He's at the hospital. Go get him. We're like, okay. And then our daughter came 10 weeks later, also through adoption, unexpected. Um, so, you know, March 11th, 2020, I was like everybody else, like beep, 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 going through life, like, this is it, you know, towing the corporate line every week and, you know, getting your first quarter bonus and going to the beach in June and just the thing. And then by October of 2020, my entire life was totally different. I had by then decided that corporate life was not for me. And all of a sudden I was a mother of two infants and I worked from home. So it was a little, you know, as my grandma would say, ass over tea kettle.
right.
so, so it was a lot in a very short amount of time,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
So,
also the best thing that could have ever happened.
so, you get two babies unexpectedly, right? Like,
Yeah.
what a blessing that was and is. How did that just like totally shift mindset for you?
Yeah. So I realized that I really enjoy working outside the home. A lot of women don't, and that's fine to men too. You know, men are staying home now too. Um, I really enjoy working outside the home. And so staying home to be a full-time mom or to be a work at home mom was definitely not something I wanted and still don't want. I enjoy working. However, it changed my perspective on I'm not going to miss this. Right. I grew up in the 80s and 90s when, women were really working outside the home, and there was all this like working women, like empowerment going on. And my mom was one of those. But I didn't want my kids to grow up like, oh, I can't come to your soccer game because I have to work. Right. Oh, mommy will be there later because she's at work. Like I just never wanted that to be the thing. Right. So then it becomes, well, you still have to pay your bills, right? You still have to keep a roof over your head, got to keep food on the table, all those things. And so let's look at where is that harmony, right? How can we make enough money? And everyone's definition of that certainly is different. And still show up as mom, because I'm not missing it. I waited a long time to become a mom, and I'm not missing it. I'm just not.
So you started down this path of really creating your dream life.
Yeah.
And kudos to you, because your story and my story is a lot different in that, like, I was the knee-jerk reaction that quit with no plan, and you were very, very strategic. And I loved, our work together during that time when you were like planning, but you had this vision in your head. And I would love for you to kind of talk about, like, how did you get there? Like, was it you and your husband doing a lot of dreaming? Did you guys really know what you wanted, or did it just kind of evolve as you started going through those motions?
Yes, I think it was a little bit of both. I'm definitely a planner. I'm definitely a goal setter. And I'm also a, let the universe figure it out kind of person at the same time. In other words, like it doesn't have to happen in my timeline or in the way that I envision it. I'm going to get there. I'm going to get to the goal. It just might not be in the way that I think it's going to be. So I think it was a little bit of both. I started back in like 2017, 2018 doing group coaching. And that was, it was my hobby, right? Side hustle. It was like something I did for fun. Maybe I made $20 or whatever. But realized that I really love group work. I really, really love group work. And I started that, back then. And then also back then I took co-starters, which is a program that's a national program. And they offer it here, in the area where we live. So I took that and I said, okay, so I've got this group coaching kind of platform that I work in. How could is this model scalable enough? And, can I monetize it enough to replace 75% of my current income? So that was the first thing I figured out. Like, how much money do we really need to live on? We were living way below our means, with my big corporate, giant paycheck. We weren't like necessarily spenders. We had a beautiful home. We still have a beautiful home, just less expensive. Great cars. We went to France on our honeymoon. Definitely, enjoyed the fruits of that labor. However, it wasn't all necessary. We lived way below our means. So then I figured out, how much money do we need to live? And you taught me that. What's your survive number? And then what's your thrive number? Right. So we figured out, okay, so I could make 75% of what I currently make, and we'd still have a pretty good life. So I'm like, all right, I'm down with that. Right. So I took co-starters. And whoever's listening to this podcast, wherever you live, look it up to see if your region or your area has it. Totally worth it. Kind of gives you a framework, especially if you've never really put together a business plan or something before. So I went through co-starters, and it was through that I really started thinking about all the different iterations that this business could take. And one of the things that came up was, well, how much does coaching cost? And is there a way that you could potentially accept insurance? And I'm also a trauma-informed yoga instructor. And there are some mechanisms where certain types of wellness providers can accept medical insurance, or like HSA, right? So if you have HSA as like a debit card, right, you could use that to pay for certain wellness services. And I thought, oh, well, that's an option. Or like EAP programs, employee assistance programs, right? So that sort of, then I went down this rabbit hole. And then I thought, well, if I was a therapist, I could really accept insurance. And so in the fall of 2019, I started researching, therapy programs. It would have to be online, right? So that I could still keep the corporate job while I was doing it. It had to be online. It had to be asynchronous. It had to be affordable. Get all these criteria. And I found one at West Virginia University that fit all those criteria. And I applied for the program and got in. And I started in January 2020. So crazy. Obviously unknown that 2 months later I'd be sent home to work.
Right.
So I started taking classes towards that so that I could do the individual work, that I could accept insurance, and group work that is still to this day cash based. And so it just has been this evolution. And so my husband and I sat down and figured out, okay, at some point school will be done and then I have to do clinical hours, right? So very similar to how medical students work. You're done with class work and then you go into internship, residency, that sort of stuff. And so sorry about that. I thought that was off. And so I knew when I got to that point, when I got to the internship and that part, that I would have to leave. Like that's the sort of deadline. And so we sat down and figured out that we would want to have a year's worth of expenses saved. And when I say a year's worth of expenses, I include getting my hair done and going out to eat and vacation, right? And things like that. It's not just buying groceries and paying the mortgage. And so once we hit that threshold, it was time. And so here we are. So there was a plan. And the only thing that really was like specific was I got to have a year's worth of expenses saved before I go. But short of that, the rest of the plan I left up to be fluid. I didn't want to be so rigid that, I actually had planned to leave in 2022. But some things came up in my personal life that kind of changed that timeline. And so you got to be a little fluid. You got to be able to roll with it. Which is also, you need that character trait to be an entrepreneur as well. You got to be able to roll. You got to be able to roll with it.
Yeah. So you left your corporate job when?
April 2023.
Yay.
Almost exactly 2 months ago today, as we're recording this.
Yeah. I can remember like the day that we talked and you're like, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn in my resignation. And I mean, nothing made me happier than seeing all the fruits of your labor come together. Truly, like you think back to like just even the thought of how do I take insurance? You know what I mean? Like before to pre 2020 and working through that. So this has been years in the making. But does it feel like that?
No, it is crazy to think back. It's 4 years and it doesn't feel like that at all. Like at all.
Yeah.
And now here it is. So,
Yeah. No. So, I had, we had talked and I had a suggestion from one of my friends, Noelle, who actually did this podcast early on. And with her clients, she recommends that they write the resignation letter like way before they turn it in. So can you talk to me about, I'd almost forgotten about that till we just
I did too.
talked.
Yeah.
So tell me about that experience for you. You probably thought I was crazy when I brought that up.
No, I loved it when you brought it up. It is very, very powerful. I actually got choked up when I wrote it. So yeah, I wrote the resignation letter way before I ever turned it in, probably months before, in fact. And I actually wrote it on my phone so that I would have it on the ready to look at on days when I was doubtful, scared, all the things. And yeah, it was really powerful. It was really powerful. And I even put like the specific person's name on it, to who, is going to be, who it's going to. It wasn't just like dear corporate. It was like, there was a person on it. And yeah, that was a very, very powerful exercise because it also, I think it sends a signal to your brain, you know, that it's over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the new phase is one phase is ending and the new phase is coming in, you know? And
Do you remember how that felt? Like felt in your body when you wrote that?
yeah, it was a release. It was a release. It felt freeing. It felt like this heaviness was lifting, right? I used to feel this like brick in the bottom of my stomach, and then suddenly I could breathe, like it was gone, you know. Um, it
That's
just
so powerful.
felt very freeing.
Yeah, so powerful.
Yeah, it was freeing. It was free. It was just it was so good to just write it down and see it. Actually, I might still have it on my phone, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I wrote it on my phone, so I'd be there. And then what was great about being on my phone is I just copied and pasted it when it was time to send it. That
Right.
was already done. And so I remember having the conversation with my direct supervisor, who, by the way, has been extremely supportive of this whole process. And, super complimentary of me as I was leaving, has said, the door's always open if you ever want to come back, like all the great things. Um, and was very supportive. And we had a very long conversation that, the day I called him, and he said, no hurry, but whenever you're ready, send me something in writing. And I'm like, it was like, after we got off the phone, because it was ready, man. I'm like, this one in the chamber, ready to go. So yeah, so it was amazing. Um, it was amazing. It was just so freeing to write it. And again, like I would look at it all the time,
Yeah.
because the thing, the overarching feeling for anyone who's thinking about doing something like this is fear, right? We're so afraid, you know, you get into third quarter, fourth quarter of your fiscal year, and you're like, I am beat down, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm done with this work, blah, blah, blah. And then the first quarter of the next year comes around and they give you your giant bonus, and then you're like, okay, I'll stay. You know, you take that giant bonus and you go on vacation, or you remodel your kitchen, or you buy a car or whatever. And you're like, it's all right. This is a good place to work.
Yep. And like 4 months later, they come at you with, the compensation increase, like strategically placed halfway through the year, right?
Yeah.
It's the dangling carrot.
Yeah. And then the fourth quarter, what happens? We got to make cuts.
Yep.
Who are you cutting from your department? If you can retire, we suggest you think about it.
Yeah.
Here's your payout. It's this cycle, and it's like every couple months, like something, you know what I mean? And so, yeah. And again, it's not all bad, right? There's a lot of really good things that occurred. And I'm not suggesting everybody just quits their job, right? I mean, we need people in those jobs and in those positions. And that's for you to work with them when they want to stay, and how to manage their
Yeah.
burnout. Um, what I am saying though is for people who really have thought long and hard about leaving, and maybe they have a specific dream. Oh, I've always wanted to, own a cupcake factory, whatever. Or maybe they don't have a specific dream. Like, I don't even know what I would do. I think fear is the thing that holds people back. How will I ever make it? How will I ever make it without this company?
Mm-hmm.
How will I ever make it without this specific paycheck? Right. Um, and
We attach like our worth, like it, it becomes who we are, right? Like you were Joelle from,
yeah,
X brand. I was Amanda from X brand. Like that's
yeah,
how we become in the community too. And
yeah.
I think we have a hard time getting away from that sometimes.
Oh yeah, I actually had someone approach me the other day, and they said, "Hey, I just had this issue with X company and blah blah blah." And they even said, "I know you don't work there anymore, but can you help me?" No.
That ship sailed.
And so, yeah, you're right. It's but yeah, I think fear is like the big thing. I grew up really poor, and parents they worked really hard. It was just hand to mouth kind of thing growing up. And so, my mom is no longer with us, but if she were, she would be going, what are you doing? Who leaves a job like that? I would have killed to have a job like that when you were, growing up. But here's the thing I've learned, very specifically, here's the thing I learned, not but, really trying to get that word out of my vocabulary. Not only is it okay, it's not going to be okay, it is okay, right? Not only is it okay, my earning potential now is exponentially more than it ever would have been had I stayed. My developmental potential is exponentially greater than it would be if I had stayed, right? Like my growth is like stunted by staying there.
Yeah.
I now have the potential to grow beyond what I ever thought possible of myself, as a professional. And that is really exciting, right? And the earning potential is also there. So again, not just about dollars, but my actual potential to grow as a professional is more, is more now.
And as a person,
And
even in
as a
your
person.
personal life, like think about it. And this kind of delves into like a whole other part of this, but you're able to, in most aspects, create your schedule now where you really couldn't before.
Yep.
And I know that's something that you and I have talked about. And like, okay, when you're done with all of your core everything, right? And you have your own practice. Like, what is that going to look like for you? And I think that just like you don't have that freedom typically in a corporate setting.
Yeah. Right. And so, yeah, so I've noticed that I've been so fortunate that I'm joining up with a group of existing therapists. They're all in a group together. And it's it's like your individual business inside of that business. I could go into that another day, but I've noticed that they all now have summer hours. And no one like asked permission of anyone else to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Like the individuals have just decided, oh, I'm not working on this day of the week, or I'm leaving every day by this time, or, whatever. So I know some corporations will go to summer hours. Oh, we're leaving at 2 on Friday. Gee, thanks. I'm still working 50 hours this week, you know? And so now in this setting, to your point, I get to decide that, right? Like I get to decide what time of day I start, when my breaks are, how long my day is, all of that. I know myself. I know the time of day that I'm the most productive, right? I know the time of day when I do my best, like creativity and thinking. So in that time of day, that's when I'll work on the business, when I'll work on growing the business, right? The times of day that I know that I'm, using a different skill set is the time of day that I'll work with clients one-on-one, you know, because now I have the option to design my day in that way, and here we are we're recording this on a Tuesday, I'm wearing a t-shirt, I got a top on. I specifically did not do full hair and makeup today for this,
Thank you.
to show people that this is how my Tuesday is today.
Yeah.
I'm, working on my front porch. And I'm working hard. It's not to say that I'm just like hanging out all day, like drinking margaritas, although I could if I wanted to today, but I'm not, I'm actually working. And it's on my terms.
It's on your terms.
Right?
Exactly.
On my terms. I was super productive all day today. Right. And I had lunch with my husband.
Yep.
And I'm outside, you know? So yeah. Yeah.
I love it. So tell us about the last 2 months post corporate.
Yeah. So to speak to, the fear. My last day was April 21st, and I know that because it's also my birthday. so my last day was April 21st, and the first 3 weeks of May, my calendar was so full, I barely had breathing room. And that was simultaneously exciting and a little frustrating. It was frustrating because I'm like, this is exactly what I'm fighting against. It's like having this full calendar. But it was also so reassuring that I'm going to be all right. Right.
Yeah.
So April 21st, I left. By May 10th, I was exhausted because my business was like skyrocketing. Right. And that momentum has continued. It's
Love
continued,
it.
which is so exciting.
I love it.
So there have been a lot of days, the last 2 months where I'm like looking at my calendar and I'm like, oh, I don't really have much going on Thursday. So cool. I bought a pool pass this year. So I'm like, so Thursday, I'm gonna get the pool. I might take my laptop if I want to or not, right? And Thursday I'll be working at the pool, right?
That's amazing.
And so yeah, like, just designing my life the way I want to. Or also like I'm no longer stressed out about, oh my God, I didn't get all the laundry done this weekend, or I didn't get all the groceries done this weekend. It doesn't matter when I get it done. It doesn't have to be on Sunday, right? So I actually went grocery shopping yesterday. My kids' school was closed yesterday because of Juneteenth. So my kids are still young enough, they go to school all year. It's daycare. And so uh, but no problem, right? I took my daughter with me to the grocery store on Monday.
Yeah.
It used to be that I had to get the grocery shopping done on the weekend because there was no time during the week to do that. But this week, I was like, oh, Father's Day was a low and slow day, chill day, right? Super slow, super chill. Family came over. We threw some burgers on the grill, like hung out. No agenda. No one was in a rush to go anywhere. And on Monday, I slept in a little bit. And that was fine. Took my daughter to the grocery store at 10 a.m. on a Monday. And that was like wild. I'm like, the grocery store's open on Monday? I had no idea.
Right?
Because, you know,
Did you feel
thought I
weird
had
in there on a Monday?
definitely.
Like, did you
And
feel like, oh my
I
gosh,
had,
I should be doing something else?
yes. And I had this fleeting thought. It was fleeting, but I had this thought of like, I hope I don't see anyone that I know that's going to be like, oh, this is how you dress now? Like, what do you do? It's Monday. Are you supposed to be doing something? Like, aren't you making any money today? What are you doing? You know?
Yeah.
Um, so it was super cool. But I had to say, I actually saw clients yesterday as well. Their appointments were at a time of day that was later than that,
Yeah.
right? So totally cool that
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna take my daughter to the grocery store, come home, get the groceries unpacked, get the kids all set up for lunch. My husband's home. Then I went to the office for a couple hours,
Yeah.
back, made dinner. We all sat down together and had dinner like civilized humans, not like, oh, mommy has a conference call,
Yeah.
you know? So yeah, so my days are very different. And I just don't have this overriding feeling of rush.
That's awesome.
Maybe there might be some days that I feel rushed just because, you know, um, but definitely not like it used to be. It used to be every day was like that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I think what you'll see, and you're probably seeing it now, is that when you feel that, right, it's like a really good time to figure out why you feel it. Is it that you've overcommitted?
Mm,
Maybe drop some boundaries that you had or
mm,
want to have, or is it self-imposed? Like a lot of times, I know for me, um, kind of like you say, there's like that, not that pressure. Like we put this pressure on ourselves for our business too, but like if you don't get
yeah,
it done, like you don't get it done. It's not a big deal. Like if my podcast doesn't go out on Sunday and it goes out on Tuesday or Wednesday, like it's not a huge deal.
that's right.
It's still
That's right.
happening.
That's right.
So just keep that in mind, right? And for anyone listening, like when you get to that space and you are not living in overwhelm all the time, like it's amazing to be able to start like figuring out what's triggering that
Yeah.
when you have the opportunity.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much, you know, to just get my word is curiosity. So like getting
Yeah.
curious about, okay, is this self-imposed? Did I overcommit? You know, checking the boundaries a little bit, right? Because you're just trained for 15 years with no boundaries.
Yep.
If there's an open slot on your calendar and someone asks for that time, you fill it.
Yep. Yeah.
Now I'm like, oh, actually, actually on Thursday from, noon to 2 is empty and it's going to stay that way. Right.
Yeah. I love it.
So, so it's so interesting, this sort of definition of productivity, definition of success, our parents came up in an era of, your work is measured by how much time you spend at work, right?
Mhm.
Um, you're measured by if you were there, how many hours you were there, etc. I grew up quite literally next door to a steel mill. And so everyone I knew worked at a steel mill, you know, and it's, you work these hours on these days, and that is how you are measured. And it would have been just totally unheard of for someone to be like, oh, I might work in the morning a couple hours on this day. Maybe I don't work Fridays ever, you know,
Yeah.
and just understanding that again, does that mean that I'm not productive? Quite the opposite, right? Quite the opposite.
Absolutely.
I have far more capacity. I have far more mental capacity, far more bandwidth, um, and just far more passion,
Mhm.
right? Passion's been reignited.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh, okay. And then again, my growth potential exponentially better. And I can out earn myself
Mhm.
from what I made last year,
Yeah.
you know, and doing that when and how I want. Now, some people might be super productive at night. Great. You know, I love my night owls. If you're a person who's super productive at night, maybe in the summertime, you're hanging out with your kids while they're off school and you work best, I don't know, 5 p.m. to midnight. Maybe that's your jam. If that's awesome. Right. But the point is, you have the autonomy and freedom to do that.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay, so what would your biggest piece of advice be for our listeners?
Don't be afraid, because you're going to wish you would have done it sooner. You're going to look back and say, what was I so afraid of? I wish I would have done this sooner. I wish I would have done this 10 years ago. I would have done this 5 years ago. Don't be afraid. Turn that fear into excitement and energy,
Yeah.
and get curious about the fear. What is it that you're afraid of? Are you afraid of failure? Are you afraid of not making it financially? Are you afraid of what people will think of you? Are you afraid of letting someone down? Are you afraid of not living up to expectations of, you know, whoever,
Yeah.
your parents, your siblings, your spouse, your whatever? So what is it precisely that you're afraid of? Figure that part out first, but don't be afraid. You're going to wish you would have done it sooner.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so tell everyone about what you do now. Like you brought up coaching, you're still coaching.
Mhm.
Talk a little bit about that. I would love for them to kind of get a glimpse into your world and be able to connect with you after listening to
Sure. Yeah. So there's two parts to what I do. One is I am working towards becoming a therapist, and I will officially be one in December of this year. So about 6 months from right now, as the day we're recording this. Um, and so in that capacity, if you live in the state of West Virginia, I can treat you and see you. Um, so I see people clinically one-on-one as a therapist. And then I also have Joelle Moray coaching, and my signature program is called Workplace Wellness. And this is where I work with groups of people in corporate, because I've been there. Trust me, I've been there. So this could be a for-profit business, it could be a nonprofit business, universities. It doesn't matter what your entity is, but think about where you work. I come in and I work with either your team as a group or the leadership team, either or. sometimes both. And we work on stress and anxiety management in the workplace. So when people work together in a, whatever the environment is, they sort of are experiencing a collective stress, if you will, right? They're all kind of stressed about the same thing, if you will. So I work with the whole team
That's
on
awesome.
stress and anxiety management. So that's workplace wellness. So those are the two parts. So I do individual work in the therapy office and I do group work as a coach.
So for workplace wellness, do you kind of tailor that to what each company needs?
Yep, absolutely. So we meet with the leadership team first to get an idea of what are the current pain points. What's getting everybody. And we really dive deep into those pain points and what they are. And then, yes, we tailor the program to address those specific things that are happening within the team. And again, sometimes I'll meet, solely with the leadership team, and then the leadership team takes those skills back to the team. Other times I work with the actual employees. And then, yeah, and there's all sorts of ways that can look. There's
Yeah.
all sorts of ways. We can do it in person. We can do it not in person. It can be everything from an hour lunchtime thing all the way up to a full day, kind of workshop. So lots and lots of options. And I also speak. So sometimes it's just coming into the annual conference and, being the keynote speaker at their annual dinner, that sort of thing to just
Yeah.
talk about workplace wellness.
Yeah. Awesome. So for those of you listening, make sure you connect with Joelle. I will have all of her links in the show notes, a little bit about her. Um, but specifically, if you are in an environment that could need some help, right, with the overall stress, burnout, overwhelm levels, this would be a great thing to bring to your leadership. And if you are one of those leaders, take a step of discomfort because it can be uncomfortable, right? To reach out to someone and talk about issues that are going on. Take that step and reach out to her. She is amazing at what she does. She will be able to help you, curate something that will work for your team. And I'm sure she's very open-minded on, budgets and things like that too, curating something that kind of fits everybody's bill. So,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
yeah,
So,
no problem.
yeah.
Um, and then you also do a couple of times a year, like a group thing, and it's more locally. So for anyone that's local, or I don't know if your next one's going to be virtual, I'll let you talk about that a little bit too, because there's rave reviews for the people that go through it.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yeah. So, 4 times a year, I do an open group. So, what that means is it's just open to the public, open to anyone who wants to come. So, it's, I don't come to your workplace, it's just open and anyone can register for it. I do that 4 times a year, try to do that 4 times a year, winter, spring, summer, and fall. Usually, the like spring and summer, or sometimes summer and fall, are in person, and then the winter is sometimes virtual. It just depends on who registers and what people want. And so we meet together and do all sorts of amazing things. It's really great to come together, as Amanda, as you know, in community with other people, especially other like-minded people.
Yeah.
Um, there's just something really magical about that. And working together in groups has been researched highly for its efficacy. So think of things like Weight Watchers, group exercise, even AA. There's a reason that groups are powerful, right? So coming together in group work can expedite your potential of what you're going to learn there. So yeah, so we learn a couple of methods. One is called press pause. And we talk about things like stress, anxiety, and trauma. So these are the things that I know about clinically. So you're getting that clinical experience, from the therapy side, but you're getting it in a coaching setting, which is a little more palatable for people a lot of times. And instead of committing to, 6 months of therapy, you're committing to one day.
Yeah.
So, it's a great way to just kind of take a break from your regular life and come together in community with people. We had about 12 people at the summer retreat that we just had a couple weeks ago. And, they loved it. People don't even want to go home. They're like, oh, can we just stay the night? So we're thinking about potentially offering some overnight packages coming up.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. That'll be awesome.
Yeah.
And I know that there's been a little whisper of a book in the making too. So when you're
Yes.
ready to like throw
Yes.
that out to the world, everyone
Yes.
would love to hear about it back on
Yes. Yes.
so
I keep saying coming in 2023, and I just say that out loud to hold myself accountable. So, to get some writing done. So
that's awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Oh, where can everyone find you?
Oh, so very simply, joellemoray.com is my website. Instagram at Joelle Moray. Those are the two easiest places to get me.
Cool. Is there anything else that you want to, little golden nuggets you want to leave for anyone today?
Listen to your gut.
Oh yeah. Listen to your
Listen
gut.
to your gut. When you're sitting there in those meetings that are endless, you know that there's just something that isn't right it's not aligning, with who you are. One of my favorite song lyrics is from George Michael, and the name of the song is Freedom, which is fantastic. And in that song, he says, sometimes the clothes do not make the man. So if you're sitting there in a suit, in a sport coat, in a pair of stilettos, and you're like, I just don't really know if this is, I wish I was in yoga pants, or I wish I was doing something else. Listen to that. Get curious about yourself and see where that curiosity takes you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
So, are you ready to start your own corporate detox journey? Well, if you are, make sure that you check out amandamcwhorter.net for different ways to work with me, as well as some freebies that could help you get started. If you're on social media, follow me at Amanda K. McWhorter on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram.